How's it going, everybody? Jackson Fuller here, and this is another episode of the Hoggin the Mic podcast. We'll bring in Hutch in just a moment to discuss a really fun week of baseball and a not so fun week of basketball for the Arkansas program. Uh, two teams going in opposite directions officially this weekend. I think we had some optimism for maybe what the basketball team could do down the stretch, but that evaporated with an 0-2 week. Meanwhile, Arkansas baseball continues to live up to our expectations in some ways with an undefeated week of its own, coming off a series sweep of Murray State. We'll dive real deep into the baseball team and kind of discuss what we've seen so far now that we've seen 3 weekends of Arkansas Razorback baseball. So let's bring in Hutch, let's play that rock music, and let's begin the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic. Hutch, how's it going, man? What's burning on the tip of your tongue right now about Arkansas sports? Are you sad? Is the the happiness of baseball season, has that officially washed away maybe the disappointment of basketball season, or does an 0-2 week like this one just kind of bring it back to the forefront of, man, what's going on with this basketball team?
I think the way the basketball team played, losing to Vanderbilt at home, kind of officially flushed any type of interest or excitement I had for the basketball team. It was always going to be a stretch for them to make any type of postseason. I'm talking NIT. But losing to Vanderbilt at home, I think, completely erased that and helped me fully get invested into this baseball team, which is looking pretty good so far.
Yeah, I don't think we need to spend too much time talking about the basketball team. So maybe let's start there and get it out of the way. The Vanderbilt loss was such a microcosm of the entire season for me because they played all right. They got up to a 10-point lead. They came all the way back and made it interesting. But there was far too long of an offensive drought there in the first half, and it kind of carried over early into the second half, and they just couldn't make an open three. And I think really when we look back at like this team's core flaws, a lot of them are going to be on the defensive side of the ball. But offensively, Musselman went into the transfer portal and tried to bring in guys that could be good shooters and maybe get the offense to a point where it hasn't been under this program. And those guys, either those guys or Musselman's development, or for whatever reason you want to put it on, they haven't translated that offensive success to this season. I mean, watching, Jeremiah and KB and Tremont and those guys miss wide open threes against the Vanderbilt zone, it caught up to them, and they, that drought really in the end of the first half just completely ruined any chance of that home win to create a 3-game win streak, have even more momentum going into Saturday's Kentucky game. I mean, I think I've focused on the offense a lot this year, and Musselman, of course, is a defensive guy, but what do you think about the Vanderbilt loss, and just like is there maybe something to what I'm saying, or do you think that at the end of the day they gave up 85 points to Vanderbilt and 100 and something to Kentucky, so the defense hasn't been good either?
Yeah, it's been pick your poison. I mean, there's been games where they've looked okay defensively, but they've been terrible offensively. I mean, really, if you look at it, the Kentucky series this week was basically that. I mean, you had a low-scoring affair where they played phenomenal defense against maybe one of the best offensive teams in the country, held them to 63 points at Bud Walton Arena, and then you get them in Rupp Arena this past weekend, and it's an offensive shootout. So it's like they can't seem to do both in one game. I mean, maybe if they play Missouri every game, then they'd be okay. But that's a winless team in the SEC. So yeah, it's that Vanderbilt loss was kind of a kick to the gut, or punch to the gut, because that's a game you should win at home for sure. And to do that was ugly. That end of the half, as you mentioned, was atrocious. And that's been unfortunately a theme for this team, as the end of halves have not been very good, first half or second half.
Did you think they shot too many threes, Hutch, in that game? It was a weird one when I was writing, during the game and preparing for like post game and stuff. I was just, that was kind of was my focus. And then at the end, they made all those threes to get them back into it. They finished with 30 attempts from three, which I think matches a season high from their their first game of the year against Alcorn State, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, they were open shots though, which is like the thing that is hard. It makes it a little hard to criticize. Like they were really wide open for most of those threes, but they didn't make them. I think they settled a little too much against Vanderbilt. I mean, it's if you create a good shot, it's good offense, but the shots were just not going in.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I mean, you look at, I mean, Battle took 10 of those, and he was coming off of a 40-point game where he made 6 of 10. I'm okay with that. Ellis was 3 of 6. Mark being 1 of 5 kind of stands out. Davenport being 1 of 5. Davenport, that's been kind of maybe the most disappointing thing of this season in terms of like just a singular part of one player's game. Davenport was supposed to be a sharpshooter, or at least a guy who could be streaky, and he's just been bad for a very long stretch. Now, I mean, he did get hot against Kentucky, I guess, but he hasn't been able to knock down threes at the rate that they probably thought he was going to. So, yeah, I think it was they probably did settle there. I mean, they did make them at the ends, but it was out of necessity. I think those aren't maybe necessary if they maybe attack the paint a little bit more. I know it was against the zone, but they've been so good at getting into the paint and scoring, getting it in Mackay involved and driving to the basket, things like that. Maybe they could have done that a little bit better during that lengthy stretch to where they didn't fall behind by 16.
Yeah. And Kentucky played a little bit of zone on Saturday, and Arkansas kind of torched them in it, and that I think Calipari was, once he saw a few made baskets against the zone, he ditched it because that's not really his style of play. But I don't know. It's just been one of those seasons, and once I think once it felt like we were turning the corner, that Vanderbilt loss happened, and we haven't really talked about the Kentucky game much. But I mean, they went on the road. They showed a lot of fight. They were up by about 7 or 8, maybe even 9 late in the second half, and Kentucky. At the end of the game, they just put the ball in freshman Rob Dillingham's hands and said, all right, man, you go beat this team. And he was able to. He got to the basket to either score or assist others. But if they had won the Vanderbilt game, they're probably avoiding the first round in the SEC tournament. Probably is a stretch, but they'd be basically. I'd feel pretty confident about them being one win away this week, either beating LSU at home or pulling off an upset at Alabama. So it's interesting. I think another journalist and I were talking about this in the press box at the baseball game yesterday. Hutch, do you think if the SEC season didn't start till February, Arkansas is probably an NCAA tournament team? They're not a great team. They're not, a team capable of winning a national championship. But I do think we've seen enough now over the past, month, Vanderbilt game included. That's a bad loss, but they, I think over the course of the month and the whole resume that they've built now, really since that last Kentucky game when they, Diva went out and they started maybe changing their identity on offense, it's been a pretty good turnaround. It just hasn't been good enough to really make this season any more meaningful than it will be.
Yeah, they dug themselves too big of a hole. You can't lose to UNCG at home in non-conference play. You can't get blown out like they were, against Oklahoma. Blown out at the beginning of conference play with all those 20-plus point losses. That's tough to overcome. But yeah, they have turned it around. I think that tells you that Eric Musselman is a good coach because he has continued to tinker and try to figure things out, even with players being out with injury. So I think that that's admirable. But again, this team is still not very good by any means. As you said, it's not a team that could win a national championship like maybe we thought they could before the season, especially after they played so well against Purdue in that exhibition game. So, yeah, I mean, it's almost like we're trying to be a little bit homerish here and saying they've played better of late, but they have. They really have. Even in the loss to Kentucky, even Eric Musselman say they played really, really hard. So you got to give them credit. It would have been really easy for this team to mail it in and quit, and they haven't. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter say, "Oh, this team quit. This team doesn't care." But how do you explain them nearly erasing a 16-point deficit late in what was going to be an ugly loss to Vanderbilt? That could have easily been another 20-plus point loss. How do you explain them going on the road to Kentucky and being up 9 with under 9 minutes to go That's, to me, it's a team that's still trying hard. It's just got too many flaws to overcome and actually win these games.
Yeah, and maybe what we've seen tells a different story when what the actual record is. I just they went 2-6 in January, and right now they're 3-5 in February. Or they went, or I'm sorry, I'm counting some March games in there. Anyways, 2-6 in January, and they're 3-5 since then. All those games, of course, in the SEC. That's not really a big improvement, but they have been playing better, and really they had nowhere to go but up in where they were in January because the basketball was really that bad. They were really that disconnected on both ends of the floor, and they got their butts handed to them in quite a few games in the SEC this year, and that really it kind of knocked them out of the tournament race even before we got to February. I think, and I know some fans and even us maybe had held out some hope that, hey, turn it around, make things at least interesting on the committee. There's they'll be lucky to make the NIT. we you and I saw some NIT bracketology that didn't include them. They're going to need to win quite a few games here in the last. They probably would need to go 2-0 and then win at least 2 games in the SEC tournament. I think to even make the NIT at this point. The only way to make the NCAA tournament is to win the SEC tournament. So. But before we transition to baseball, though, I think we do have to mention Khalif Battle, 3 straight 30-point games. I think he's the first Hog to do that since Mason Jones, I think is what we saw. And, man, he has really turned a corner on both ends of the floor. I've been so impressed with his offense, but I've almost been equally impressed with his defense. He used to get pulled out of games for his defense, not, the occasional bad shot or a missed layup would get him out, but Musselman had a really short leash with him because of things he was doing on the defensive end of the floor. That's not the case anymore. He's really battling over there. I mean, he took some tough assignments in the Kentucky game and really held up against either Reed Shepard or Antonio Reeves. And, man, to score, 30, how much did he have? 34 in Rupp and nearly help Arkansas pull off an upset over Kentucky. It's a shame that Arkansas is as bad as it is. Otherwise, I think this run of performances would maybe live a little bit longer in the memories of Arkansas fans. But now people are just going to be wanting to forget this season, huh?
Yeah, probably so. But it's unfortunate because it is probably one of the best scoring stretches in school history in terms of just a 3-game segment because he's been unreal. I mean, he's shot, well over 50% from the floor, over 40% from 3, and he's been like 90-something% from the free throw line. That's probably been the most incredible thing is he's just getting the free throw line a ton. I think he scored, I want to say 112 points over that 3-game stretch. And Mason Jones, when he did it, he's the only other guy that's done it in school history, 3 straight 30-point games. I think he only had 102. So you could really make a strong case that this is the best scoring stretch by a player in school history. And for them to only have 1 win out of it's kind of disappointing, but it's still incredible. And honestly, I think it gives you hope. I mean, does he come back? He's got another year of eligibility. Does the fact that he's come on strong this late in the season maybe lead to him like, okay, maybe I'll come back and do this for a full season and I'll be an NBA draft pick? Or does he think, okay, I've done enough that I could get an opportunity somewhere, whether it be G League, overseas, whatever. Especially because he has improved on defense. I think Eric Musselman, assuming he's still the head coach, would gladly take Battle again next year.
Man, it's the roster turnover with this team is going to be fascinating in the offseason. There's not a single player on the team that I'm like, he's definitely staying or he's definitely leaving. I mean, other than the guys that have used up all their eligibility, I mean, Trevin Brazile is a great example. None of us thought he would have another year of college after this season. It would be straight to the NBA. But I don't really think I don't know if he's going straight to the NBA anymore. I mean, he still has the high ceiling, right? But this year has not been a good year. I mean, could he get drafted? Maybe, but I think there's a world where he comes back, and if he comes back, is it to Arkansas or is it to somewhere else? Does he transfer out because of how poorly, this season has gone? And really, his time at Arkansas has not gone as well as he would have hoped, and a lot of that's injury-based, but I don't know, maybe a fresh start is something that could do him good. I know Arkansas would probably love to have him back next year and try and make things right with him in the fold. And that's got that. Hopefully for all parties, that's what happens. But we'll see. Again, he's just one of the many where we really don't know what's going to happen with this team. Let's move on to baseball. The happy, the good vibes of Fayetteville right now. 4-0 week. They start out by crushing Murray State on Tuesday, 21-1, and then they win 3 games against. They crush Grambling State on Tuesday, and then they sweep Murray State over the weekend. 2 pitchers duels and a blowout win sandwich in between. Maybe a pitcher's duel on Friday is. I don't know. It felt like a pitcher's duel at time because the Arkansas baseball offense just hasn't quite gotten rolling yet. We had this discussion last week. Hutch, are you less concerned, more concerned, or equally concerned about the Arkansas offense than you were last weekend?
I feel a little bit better just because we have seen some other guys step up and perform. Nolan Souza, the freshman, had a couple of really big games the last 2 games of the Murray State series. We saw Ross Lovich have a good game against or on Saturday. Trying to think, Will Edmondson has had some good moments. So, there's guys that are starting to come together. It's just a matter of how Dave Van Horn's going to kind of piece this all together moving forward. So I feel a little bit better. Plus, I think I've said this before, they don't have to be a great offense. This team doesn't. They just have to be able to score 5 or 6 runs, and they're going to be tough to beat because of how good this pitching staff is, both from a starter's perspective and the bullpen. I mean, it's looking like it's going to be a historically dominant pitching staff like we all said and thought it would be before the season. So just got to get that offense going a little bit. We saw a little bit of small ball. We might see a little bit more of that as we go, maybe more than we were used to because they haven't been hitting as many home runs. But it's still a work in progress for sure. But I do feel a little bit more encouraged after this past weekend.
Yeah, I'm encouraged by the depth, but I am a little not more concerned, but my alarm bells are still kind of ringing for the likes of Vahiva Aloy and Hudson White. Those 2 in particular. They were supposed to be, I think when DVH was planning his lineup card a couple months ago, he had Hudson slotted in as the 2-hitter and Vahiva as the 4-hole hitter. And, Vahiva stayed up there in the middle of the lineup and has started every game, but a lot of that's because I don't think Arkansas has another shortstop on the roster it clearly trusts right now. So Vahiva's going to be that guy. Hudson has bounced all over the lineup now. He was hitting 9th yesterday. He hasn't started some games. The depth has been nice to see, but that depth didn't necessarily perform against the really good teams in Arlington. It's performed against James Madison and Murray State. Can it perform when it gets to SEC time? We'll see. Vahiva and Hudson were 2 of the guys that we expected to be good hitters, really, all season. Hitting comes and goes, and maybe it'll come for those 2 eventually, and they'll get rolling with the SEC play a couple weeks away. But, man, I think Arkansas, they'd need to be an average hitting team, but they need those 2 guys to be good to lift the entire lineup. And I think as we get into the SEC play, you're going to see some of the younger guys, some of the guys that are less heralded, maybe dip down a little bit, which is fine. Those 2 need to rise to the occasion in the coming weeks and really clean and really just be a better presence at the plate and more productive.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, Hudson White, I'm less concerned about because he does have a track record of performing in the Big 12 against really good teams. Whereas Aloy, that's a little bit more of a concern because he is coming from Sacramento State. He didn't face this kind of pitching, but at the same time, he was their best hitter in the preseason against this incredible pitching staff that Arkansas has. So it's like he's shown that he can hit good pitching. So I think he's going to be. I think Dave Van Horn described him as streaky, and I think that's going to be the case. There's going to be some weekends where it looks like Arlington, where he goes 0 for 13, but then there's going to be other weekends where he, maybe goes 4 for 15 and has a home run or 2 or something. So I think he's going to be an up and down year for him. Overall, he's going to be decent, I think, because he still plays shortstop, as you said. He's a good defender. So I think it's he's going to be okay. And the fact that he has 2 years at Arkansas, I think is also encouraging. Like, obviously you want him to be good this year because, you want the offense to perform for this incredible pitching staff, give you a chance to win a national championship. But I think he has time to learn. He's shown he has the potential. It's just a matter of when it all comes together for him.
Yeah. One thing that I'm going to keep my eye on, I think, the next couple weeks is walks, is like just a kind of a barometer of who is like having good at bats and everything. Because when I pull up the Arkansas baseball stats, the guys that lead the team in walks are also the guys that are leading them right now in batting average and slugging percentage for the most part. Definitely an on base percentage. Obviously, with those walks, it's Jared Sprague-Lott, it's Kendall Diggs, and Ben McLaughlin. And they've also started almost every game, so they're getting a little bit more at bats. But I think that's something that the rest of the team can kind of try and mirror, is being a little bit more patient at the plate. And I think ever since the Oklahoma State game, we've started to see that a little bit from the team, and they're being more patient. They're getting themselves into some better counts, and because of that, they're scoring more runs than they did down in Arlington. But still, I think they've played 11 games this year, and in only 3 of them have they scored more than 6 runs. Like you said, that's honestly probably good enough given how good this pitching staff is. But we still haven't seen this pitching staff like go up against the SEC either. I'm very, very, very confident they will be just fine. But we're the week to week grind of facing top 25 teams. They're going to need some Saturdays and Sundays where they're scoring 8 runs, just because an off day will happen for a pitcher eventually. And I'd like to see the walks, the on base percentage, that kind of go up, especially right now when the power it just hasn't been there. I mean, Kendall Diggs took him 10 games to hit his first home run. I think you said yesterday Nolan Souza has his first home run before Vahiva Aloy. The power just hasn't been there yet this season, and maybe they can kind of spark that with some more patient approaches and some more walks. And I think they've been heading in that direction over the past 5 games.
Yeah, and they've also been putting the ball in play. I'll give them that too, because the strikeouts are down compared to last year. A decent, like a pretty significant amount, I feel like. So the fact that they're putting the ball in play is beneficial. They have grounded into a bunch of double plays. That's probably been one of the more frustrating things as well. But yeah, sorry, allergies are killing me here.
You're good.
But the maybe they do a little bit more small ball. We've seen them bunt some. I guess Murray State got a little upset with one of the bunts. Ben McLaughlin laid down late in the game on Saturday, but it was good to see, just because it showed that he can do that to beat the shift. How do you get teams out of shifting against you? Well, you do that. So that was encouraging to see. So they got a couple of sack flies. So you think if they just keep putting the ball in play, good things could happen. The errors could happen from the other team. So the fact that they're not striking out is maybe another, positive to take away, despite the offense still scuffling along so far.
Yeah, definitely. And look, if you're not going to be a powerful team, you better be a good contact team and put pressure on the defense. And I think there's still room for Arkansas to be a good power team. The bunt was, I mean, I wasn't there, but the bunt was for a base hit, right? Like, it was a drag bunt. It wasn't a sack. Like, the coach has no right to be upset about that. It's if you're going to play the shift, it's basically like you're going for a base hit. He could easily screw up that bunt and bunt it right back to the pitcher, and it's the easiest out Murray State will have all game. Like, that's anywho, let's not dive into the drama between head coaches. Let's get into the pitching staff again. I mean, we might sound like we're going to beat a dead horse a little bit on this podcast this year, just how impressed we were. Did any one pitching performance stand out to you this weekend of, that was, out of everybody, that was really, really nice to see?
Man, I would say, I know you'll probably want to talk about Gabe Gackle. You're a big Gabe Gackle guy. So I'll stick with, we've talked so much about the starting pitchers, but how about having Will McIntyre as kind of like a 4th starting pitcher that you can deploy over multiple games over a weekend? I mean, he's not Kevin Kopps, because no one is going to be Kevin Kopps again. But what Will McIntyre has done so far this year is very Kevin Kopps-like, pitching multiple times and often being really good. And I mean, on Sunday, after pitching 2 innings on Saturday, he comes in and throws and earns an 11 out save. And he had to work through some trouble. I mean, there was the bases loaded situation they inherited, got out of it with a crazy wild double play with the infield fly rule that I wrote about last night. And then there was another error. Kittle Diggs dropped a fly ball and right. That put runners on second and third. They were representing the tying runs. And next pitch, he gets out of it with a pop up. So he could pitch around, traffic on the base paths. He even said it. He admitted, despite being a pitcher, he's like, I like there being runners on base because he likes the pressure of it. And so I think that to have a piece like that in your bullpen is invaluable.
I do love Gabe Gackle. I don't really know why. I think it's just because last week on the podcast, I think I was like, maybe Gabe Gackle should be the closer a little bit. And then Dave did that on Friday night. But I've got to say, I have been blown away by what I've seen from Brady Tigert this season. And it's for a team, and of course on last weekend they didn't play a 3-game series. It was 3 different teams. But over the course of the season, teams are going to face Hoggin Smith in game 1, and he's going to be Hoggin Smith, and that's going to be very frustrating. And then the calendars, the next day is going to come on the calendar, and teams are going to be like, all right, we're done with Hoggin Smith. Let's move on. We're facing a righty now that's like not got the most electric stuff in the world. Great stuff, but he's not Hoggin Smith. Let's get the offense kind of rolling today. And then Brady Tigert is just punching these teams in the face with another great performance. Arkansas is able to stack those types of performance. I mean, we talked about it yesterday. They get to Sunday, and they got everybody in the bullpen available when those two guys can both, pitch solid. For now, it's 5-6 innings, but DVH has told us, he could have gone out there for another inning, but we liked his pitch count, blah, blah, blah. Man, for him, I mean, for him to be 2-0 right now and a 1.12 ERA, which leads the weekend starters. Of course, Colin Fisher has a 0.00 ERA right now, and he'll get the ball on Tuesday. But I love what I've seen from him. I think the curveball is a devastating pitch, or the slider, whatever type of breaking ball he throws. And man, his ability to kind of just keep the train moving with strikeouts, with good pitching performances, and then set up the best Sunday pitcher in the nation in Mason Molina to go for the sweep on Sunday. Arkansas has just so many weapons in the arsenal from the pitching staff standpoint. And I think we all knew Brady Tigert was going to have a good year this year, but I mean, if he keeps that ERA below 3, even below 4 all season, that's a massive, massive win for Arkansas, giving all the pieces that surround him.
Yeah, he's been incredible. And I do feel like I need to give Hoggin Smith some love because we've almost kind of taken him for granted.
No.
I know everyone was, he took the nation by storm with 17 strikeouts against Oregon State. It's tough to follow that, but, of course, naturally, first batter he faces of the weekend hits a home run, solo bomb. But then after that, he retires, I believe, 18 of 19 guys he faced. He had a walk mixed in there. And he was just phenomenal. 12 strikeouts in 6 innings. He's the real deal. To see that kind of consistency from him is phenomenal, and I'm very much looking forward to watching him the rest of the year.
You know what? I guess we'll give him some praise, but I'm going to do my best to come on this podcast and only give him a lot of praise when he gets 15 strikeouts a game. I think, after the Oregon State one, that's the bare minimum expectation for me. And he only had 12 on Friday, man. That was tough to see. It was really a big-time underperformance by Hoggin Smith. And of course, I'm being sarcastic, and I have a monotone voice at times. So it was real. It was just good to, as much as the Oregon State game was good for him to go out there and show it to the world after, the hiccup against James Madison, it was good for him to kind of reaffirm, hey, I'm that dude Friday night. And I mean, God, I can't wait till he goes 8 innings in a game. It might not be for another couple months, but it's going to be really exciting to see those strikeout numbers just kind of rack up as the season goes on, and as he goes later in the games, that pitch count gets a little looser. And we kind of joked about it in the press box. He's got a chance here to break some serious records for Arkansas if he keeps this pace up. I mean, the single season and all-time career strikeouts records. He's still a ways away, but I think before the season, it was kind of he would need a miraculous year to kind of get there. Now it's, well, if he just keeps doing what he's doing and stays healthy, there's a good shot he gets there.
Yeah, I did the math after Friday's game, and I think even if he only averages 6 innings for the rest of the regular season, and his strikeout rate drops to I think he's averaging 17 per 9 innings or something ridiculous, or maybe 18. Actually, I think it is. It's I think it may be 21 or something. Which the record, the all-time strikeouts per 9 innings record is, I want to say 16 point something. Even if he only strikes out 15 per 9 innings and averages 6 innings the rest of the season, that would be more than enough for him to break the record. Paul Skeens, I think, averaged about 15 point something strikeouts per 9 innings. I think that's a pretty good bar to kind of expect for him. He'll come down a little bit once he gets an SEC play, but he's definitely off to a good start.
Yeah, he's off to a great start, and the entire team is really off to a great start, of course, pitching, but strikeouts in particular. I mean, oh man, I'm trying to find the stats here on d1baseball.com, which Arkansas stayed at the number 2 position. For anyone listening now, I'm sure they'll have already known that by the time they listen to this. But anyways, Arkansas leads the entire country with 163 strikeouts. LSU is the next closest at 154, and LSU has played one more game than Arkansas. I also think the Arkansas pitching staff is a lot better than LSU, so I could see that number, not a lot better, but it is a better pitching staff. I could see that number kind of separating itself over the course of the year. But LSU's 11-1. They're having a great season. Their offense is definitely a little bit better than Arkansas's right now. So very excited for when the Tigers come to Fayetteville. But I'm getting ahead of myself there, just looking at the stats. That tends to happen when I go to a national leaderboard or anything like that. One concern for the pitching staff, Hutch, and it's not really a concern, but it's something that I think we need to watch is, yes, the bullpen was great this weekend. Will McIntyre came out and shoved it. Gabe Gackle got his first career save. Cody Frank looked pretty good, I would say. Who pitched out of the bullpen in game 2? Remind me, since I wasn't there. I was covering.
McIntyre threw 2 innings, and then Dossett threw the last inning, which all he's done in his 2 innings this year has been 6 up, 6 down with 5 Ks.
That's pretty good for a lefty specialist. But so the only other pitcher that we haven't named that pitch, or that we did name, was Gage Wood, who only lasted a third of an inning and gave up 3 hits. There was an error sprinkled in there. He gave up only 1 earned run because McIntyre was able to come out and get the job done. I do think there are going to be times this year where Arkansas, they need to throw a lot more pitchers than they did this weekend. And, we saw some struggles from Gage and from Faraday in Texas. Faraday not too much, but he did blow the save, of course, against Oklahoma State. I just think it's Dave Van Horn said it on Friday, when you got a chance to get one, you go get it. And that's kind of why he brought in Gackle and tried to seal the game 1 win. He's not going to mess around with the pitchers, but I think it would be nice, at least next weekend, especially before SEC, to give some of those relievers maybe some weekend experience and not just be, have them going this Tuesday, because they're going to need guys like Faraday and Gage Wood as the season rolls along.
I think that's fair. I mean, but the good thing is that you do have options. So, if Gage Wood for some reason experiences a sophomore slump and he's not super effective this year, maybe Cooper Dossett can emerge as a guy. Which I will say, Stoic Hewlett is the lefty specialist. Cooper Dossett is the right-hander sophomore. Hasn't really pitched a whole lot, but he's got a strong arm. I mean, he's touched 96 on the gun, and maybe he's a guy that can, emerge and fill the hole that Gage Wood leaves. If Gage Wood doesn't rebound, who's to say he isn't? So I think they've got plenty of options on the staff where we haven't seen Parker Coyle pitch a whole lot. Ben Bybee is still out because he has mono, so they've got other pieces that are gonna come back into the fold. Hunter Dietz is a freshman that we haven't seen yet, and he's a guy that should be hopefully pitching. I want to say Dave said in April. Maybe Dylan Carter comes back for Tommy John at some point. So there's plenty of options where I think he's got the luxury where if say on Sunday when Gage Wood was struggling, he was able to pull him really quick because he knew he had McIntyre ready to go, and he had other guys ready to go behind McIntyre. Christian Fouch is another guy we haven't mentioned. He's another guy that could also pitch. So they've got options where they don't have to stick with a guy if he's struggling. They could pull if they realize, hey, this guy doesn't have it today, go get him quick before the damage is too great, and go to somebody else that could get it done.
Yeah, and the one thing that goes against my argument is, or not argument, but what I just said is the starters are all on pitch counts right now, and pretty strict ones. So there might even be fewer innings for the relievers here over the next couple weeks once those guys get a little looser leash. I feel like I've used that metaphor 3 times in this podcast about a leash. So on that note, Hutch, let's take a quick break. I've got a work meeting, as tends to happen during these podcasts. And when we come back, we are going to dive a little bit into spring football and have some discussions about what we're looking out for, which kicks off this Thursday over at the Arkansas practice field. So stay tuned. We'll be right back to talk some football. All right, let's do the football. After it's been now 3 months, I think, about maybe 4 since the gross 2023 season concluded. I wish I could say there's optimism in the air, but I don't necessarily feel that too much. I think a lot of people are kind of not really that excited about the upcoming football season, other than it just being football season. There's a little bit of a sense that this could be a wasted season with bringing Sam back for another year. I'm inclined to be a little bit optimistic right from the get-go, just because why not? It's spring, anything is possible, and they're going to have a new offense and a new quarterback and a new offensive line, and I think those 3 things, if they all work out well, could spell a really good team. But Hutch, let's put the quarterback talk to the side. What is the thing that you're going to be most interested from spring football outside of that quarterback competition?
It's kind of related to the quarterback competition, but I'm very interested to see what the offense looks like under Bobby Petrino. I think that's probably the number one reason for optimism among fans, because they remember the great Bobby Petrino offenses when he was here and winning 10 and 11 games back in 2010 and 2011. Are they going to be that good, that talented on offense? Probably not, because those were just historically great offenses for Arkansas. But can he make an immediate impact that we didn't see with Dan Enos? I think that's a legitimate question, and something that we could at least get an idea of this spring, regardless of who wins the quarterback battle, whether it's Taylor Green or Jacoby Criswell. I'm very interested to see how he uses these wide receivers. Very interested to see kind of how the offensive line comes together. Obviously, Sam Pittman and Eric Mateos will have a huge say in that as well. Very interested to see kind of how it all meshes together offensively with Bobby Petrino calling the shots.
Yep. I will say I'm going to be taking pretty much everything from the spring with a grain of salt, based off just like the excitement and buildup that was coming into the fall based off the spring. And of course, I wasn't here last spring, but it's we gotta hype it up as journalists, as writers. That's our job. That's how we get the people to read our stuff, and I will do my fair share of that. But I'm also not. I'm going to try not to get carried away with anything. So I think the one thing that I'm most looking out for that I think can still transition from the spring to the fall is, what does the offensive line look like in terms of depth chart and rotation? Where do the new guys fit in? Where do the old guys fit in? I'll be frank, we've seen a year with some of these old guys that have been in the program, with I guess the 2 guys that come back are Patrick Kudus and Josh Braun. But of course, Andrew Chambly's back. You've got Tykees Crawford. You got some of the depth pieces. And no offense to them. I said on this podcast, I think when we first started talking about football, that I'm glad a lot of those guys came back to build that depth. But if we go into the fall and a lot of those, returnees are among the first string group, I think that's a concern. I want to see some of these new transfers really, make their presence known and sort of solidify themselves as that first string group. Maybe those guys that come back make huge jumps and are absolutely earn their spot as starters, and that would be great for Arkansas to show that kind of development from their own recruits. But I think for best case scenario for the next season, the new guys, Blackstock, Nichols, Carmona. I'd love to see them as starters from day one, or if not, by the time the spring ends, that they are the core group on that offensive line.
Yeah, and I'll tell you right now, they're not going to be starters from day one. That is a Sam Pittman kind of philosophy that he's learned. He learned it the hard way a couple of years back. He brought in some transfers, put them first string from day one of spring ball, and it rubbed some guys the wrong way, led to some transfers. And I think Sam Pittman learned, okay, we got to make these guys earn it. But by the end of spring, it would be nice to see one or two of those three guys be in the starting lineup. Just because, as you said, like the guys that are coming back, they weren't necessarily great last year. Maybe another year in the system will help. Maybe a different system will help. You got to think that a different scheme will, to me, Bobby Petrino is an offensive genius. Say what you want about his personal life, say what you want about him as a head coach and his recruiting ability, those things. But when it comes to X's and O's, I want Bobby Petrino calling the plays. And I feel like he will, if there is any deficiency on the offensive line, I feel confident that he's the kind of guy that can scheme it up to where it kind of covers up those deficiencies.
That's fair. Of course, I'm not a native of the natural state, so I don't have the kind of respect's not the right word, but I'm still in wait and see mode with Petrino myself. I think I think he's going to 100% be an upgrade on Dan Enos, just based off what those two guys have done over the courses of their careers as offensive coordinators. No question in my mind, the Arkansas offense will be better coached this season. I'm honestly not sure if they've got better players. Like, I think the offensive line is going to go a huge way into doing that. And if the offensive line is better, that will elevate everybody around them. But, KJ Jefferson has proven more as a college quarterback than either Taylon Green or Jacoby Criswell. A lot more for that matter. Rocket Sanders, the same compared to any of the running backs. All of the receivers are back. The tight ends are back. I think Luke Haas and Ty Washington are going to take massive steps forward, but it's the same guys. Like, I'm really not sure if there's more talent on the offensive side of the football this year compared to last year. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much Petrino can maximize everybody around him. I think there's a lot of reasons for optimism there, but in reality, Hutch, I mean, I guess this goes back to me not getting too crazy about spring. Like, we're really not going to have the right answers until we see it on the fall on the football field in the fall, because just of how good everything at times looked in the spring last year. I mean, I remember you guys telling me about Tesla and Satenia, and I'm saying this to say, not to say like, oh, you guys were wrong. Like, you guys were probably right. Those guys showed out, but it did not translate over to the fall. And for Arkansas this year, it's all about that fall for Coach Pittman. For Hunter Yurachek's decision to endorse Coach Pittman and bring him back for another year. They could light the world on fire in the spring, and if there's a couple injuries and things don't go well in the fall, that's going to be a tough thing to recuperate from for this current regime.
Yeah, we got to see it in the fall. You're exactly right. Spring, fine, great. Yeah, I mean, because if the offense does great, does that mean your offense is great, or is your defense terrible, and vice versa? It's so hard to figure out. Plus, we really don't get to see much. Like, they're going to open up practices to us, I believe, this fall. We're going to get to, or this spring, like they usually do. But I think they usually close the scrimmages, and even then, like it's going to be a little bit different in the fall. I think there are a handful of guys that maybe aren't rolling early. They could also add some late transfers. So it's going to be different, once fall camp rolls around and the actual season. But yeah, you can't get too carried away with the spring. I know the spring game Fans love to overreact. There's always a third string running back who lights up the walk-ons, and people are like, oh, why isn't he playing more? Well, you got to remember who he's going up against. So there's only one time I can remember that actually being the case. Dominique Johnson had a really solid spring game, and I was like, oh, well, whatever. It's against the fourth-string freshmen and walk-ons, whatever. And then he ended up being like the team's number one running back at the end of that season. So usually, though, it doesn't turn out that way. But so it's always important to keep that in mind as fans. Like, hey, what you see in the spring game doesn't always translate to the field in the fall.
Let's wrap up with this, Hutch. Give me one newcomer you're most excited of watching, either a transfer, a true freshman. Who might it be that you're, first day of practice, you're really excited to see what he looks like in person and how he performs?
I mean, the obvious answer is the quarterback, Taylor Green. But for the sake of not giving a stereotypical answer, I'll say Xavier Sori, the linebacker transfer from Georgia. Maybe less. I mean, I'm excited because he's a 5-star recruit. You don't get to see too many of those here at Arkansas. But he's also a very critical transfer. They need him to be the guy. I think they kind of are hoping that he'll come in and have a Drew Sanders-like impact from a couple of years ago. So very anxious to see if he is the real deal. Don't know if we'll know that right away, although the couple of springs ago, one of the few times where I saw a defensive player and Drew Sanders, I was like, okay, that guy's a dude. I know he's going to be really good, potential All-SEC. And all he did was go out and earn second-team All-American honors. So, that guy is going to be someone I keep a close eye on throughout the spring.
I'm going to give another defensive answer and go Anton Junkaj. I can't wait to see him line up opposite of Landon Jackson. I think that defensive line has a chance to be special this year. Again, I think I said this last time on the pod. It's not going to be Georgia or Alabama or like an elite LSU defensive line, but it could be one of the top defensive lines in the conference. And if that happens, that's going to make life for the linebackers easier. It's going to make life for the secondary easier. I'm expecting big things from Landon and Cam Ball this year. And then if they can if Anton can be what Trajan Jeffcoat was, maybe even a little more productive, and they can find another defensive tackle to pair with Cam, that's as good a starting four as it gets across the country. Because I think Landon Jackson, man, he's got a chance to be a first-round pick in next year's draft if he comes back and puts it all together and puts it on the film. But yeah, so Anton's the guy, the newcomer that I'm looking forward to. I guess neither of us said the freshman, but not in a great freshman class, and also I think for this year and winning now is paramount for Sam Pittman, and it's going to be tough for the freshmen to maybe earn that trust and crack the two deep. But there are some options there. I think the coaches have high regards for Bradley Shaw, the linebacker, and Charleston Collins as well, the defensive lineman. Two more defensive guys. Can we get some offensive talent infused here? What's going on? But it's going to be fun to just get out there again and see what this team looks like. And honestly, I've sold this to you, Hutch, and some other guys. I'm excited to see a smiling Sam Pittman again, some optimism within the program. I mean, last year it got so bad so quickly that I think it'd be really nice to enjoy football season again. And even if we're starting in the spring with some enjoyment, that's fine by me.
Yeah, I think so. And I will say, if we want to give some love to the offense, Jaquindon Jackson, I think that's how you say his name, transfer running back from Utah, is one that I'm very actually excited to see him, because he's just kind of an interesting guy. Got the former quarterback background, converted to running back, and had a lot of success at Utah. Very anxious to see kind of how he fits into that running back room that seems to still have a decent amount of talent, even with Rocket Sanders and AJ Green transferring out.
You want to talk about a competition? That running back competition is going to be fun to watch too, because I think there's three guys that probably all think they deserve to be RB1 in Jaquindon, Debinion, and Gustav. And for my liking, I mean, out of any running back I saw last year, Isaiah Gustav provided the most pop and excitement. So I know he's the sophomore, the youngest guy of that trio, but they're going to be fine at the running back position. It'll be how do they divide the snaps and who maybe emerges as the go-to guy, which will be very interesting. But Anyways, I think that's a wrap for us. No need to dive too much more. Women's basketball note, of course, they lost both of their games this week. They're going to start the SEC tournament this week as a 10 seed against Auburn. Feels like they need at least 2 or 3 wins to have a consideration for the tournament. Hopefully they can pull that out, but of course they'll have to beat LSU if they beat Auburn on Thursday night. So we'll have some eyes over there, and of course a busy week on the Hill, Hutch. Or what are you most excited for? Spring football, the home finale for LSU, or another home baseball series against McNeese State on the horizon?
I'm excited for Hagen Smith Day on Friday. I'm so excited to see him pitch every week this year. So that easily beats the start of spring ball and the LSU basketball game for sure.
I'll go spring ball just to be a little different, but I am once we get to conference play, I don't think there's going to be any contention for baseball. But we've had a few non-conference home series now. This will be the last one, and hey, football is in the air. Whether Arkansas is going to be good or not, football is in the air, and that's a good thing for me. So, all right, thank you, Hutch, so much for joining. As always, had a fun time, and everybody, thank you so much for listening. I will say we got the most listeners we've ever had on a podcast for the last episode. So thank you, baseball season, and continue tuning in. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next time on Hoggin the Mic.